So we're going to start on time with our process. Maybe we'll just have a couple minutes because we have someone new here and she's not on camera right now. You guys all know how to do this, but we can reemphasize a teaching point before we start. So when you have a technique, what you have is you have an anchor, something to do, someplace for your mind to go. When your mind doesn't know where to go, it wanders, right? It doesn't know what to do, what its function is. So if we were to say that much of our thinking is probably destructive, like the number that I normally hear from people and from a different psychologist whose book I was reading is about 70%. So 70% of our thinking is actually harmful, full of worry, self-criticism, doubt, all of these things. And all of that has a physical effect on the body. It alters your cortisol levels. It alters your immune system. So did all of you out there know that if you have, for example, like excess worry and things like that going on, it compromises your immune system. It'll make you sick. That does happen. So I work a lot with cancer patients. Doctors are telling cancer patients all the time, try to stay happy. They don't give them any way to stay happy, but they just say, just be happy, because they've seen studies that are very conclusive that people who have a positive mindset, their outcomes with cancer therapy are better, right? More than a placebo. So they're like, ooh, we got to do something to keep people happier in this positive mindset. So 70% of our thinking is damaging because we just operate in this habitual pattern, which means that we just kind of think with the same patterns that we always think about, right? So when you meet people and they ask questions like, hey, are you a half full, cup half full, or cup half empty person? And people say, well, I'm an optimist, or I don't know, I'm a little bit of a pessimist. Do you think they got like that from day one of their life? Yeah, probably not. They probably had a tendency, and then they had all these things happen in their lives that reinforced their tendency, and their pattern just became repetitious, and it became, they started to identify that. They say, now this is me. And we hear people say, I do this, right? But they've not always done that. They've just done it for a long enough a period of time where they have identified with it, right? Mm-hmm. So when we're trying to work with the mind, this first process is to work with what we see that arises, because we just take so much for granted. Everything that we identify with, I am like this, I do it this way, this is how I see myself. This is all, if we were to really break it down, it's basically a fabrication. It's a misidentification based on previous experience, right? So, for example, you're an American, and you could say, yeah, I identify with being an American, but let's say you move to Portugal. All of a sudden you change your passport and you're no longer American. That's how easy it is to change your identity. Not that hard. But in our mind, it's such a deeply ingrained thing. We think it's very solid, okay? So what we're gonna do is talk about, and we're gonna work through a process of having our minds. What happens is it's kind of a three-step process. You see the parts that are arising with your minds. Normally we don't pay attention to what's going on, so you're going to see it. And your process, you saw the intro video, is just labeling it rising and falling. All right, rising and falling is rising and falling of the breath. Then when thoughts come up, first thing is you see it. Then we're going to give you a secondary piece of homework. You're just going to label it thinking. Lightly 3 times, thinking, thinking, thinking. You let it go, you return to rising and falling. So you become aware of what's going on, you practice letting go, and then you practice returning to the moment. That's the basic process, okay? So we're going to start with a little bit of light yoga to be comfortable in our seats. You can just follow along, okay? So we're going to start with what's called a shiminpop. A shiminpop is kind of like an opening and a closing. You just follow me. You just breathe in, out, in, and out. Okay, you just follow me. You'll breathe in. Start with the right hand. We're going to go over, out, in, out, twist, in center, out, twist, in center. You're going to put your hands together. You're going to interlace them. You're going to breathe in as you arch back, out as you lean forward, and up. You're going to switch your grip, which means you're going to switch your grip when you interlace your hands. One more time, you arch back, you breathe in, out, forward, and up, Out, hands on the knees. We're going to do something called Sufi grind. Just going to rotate from the hips. Okay, there you go. Nice and loose from the hips. You can breathe in as you go forward, out as you go back. A couple more times. We're going to do 3 times the opposite direction. Okay, good. We're going to go ahead and switch our legs so we create a little bit of balance, right? One side, if we just keep doing the side that's easy, we become very unbalanced. Hands together again, we breathe in. Right hand first, out. And up. Out. In. Out. In. Out. Hands behind your back, interlace your fingers. Breathe in. Out. And up. Let's change your grip. One more time, breathe in, arch back. Out. And up. Out, hands on the knees. And rotate 3 times in one direction. Three times in the opposite direction. Okay, good. We're going to do a little Qigong, a simple Qigong sequence to kind of help us get settled quickly. So you're just going to follow along. This is easy. Put your hands in front of your belly button. You're going to drop your elbows. Just relax. You're just going to breathe in as you expand and breathe out as you contract. You're going to do it at your own pace. Okay, you just breathe in. And now we're going to do this 5 more times. At your own pace, you don't have to follow me. In next motion, you breathe in as hands go up towards the shoulder height, and they just turn over down towards the knees as you breathe out. Do that 5 more times. Now we're going to put our fingertips together. You're going to breathe in as you circle up the midline, out as you go down and around. Very good. Relax your shoulders. Breathe in and out. Okay, so 5 more times. And when you're done, you just continue until I'm done. On the last time, as you breathe out, you're going to make a little triangle in front of your forehead, okay? You're going to breathe in as you kind of scoop behind you. And you can breathe out as your hands kind of go up to your head. You breathe in as you kind of scoop. You got a little chair there. You got to move around. Out as they go up towards your head. We'll do that 5 more times. If you want to scoot up, you can. Or side. On that 5th time, what we're going to do is make that little triangle again. You're going to breathe into your triangle. As we exhale, you're going to lower that triangle to where the thumbs touch your belly button, the fingers underneath. You're going to drop your shoulders. You're going to just breathe into that triangle 3 times. Okay, good. So we're going to sit for more formal meditation now. So we're going to say you can put your hands wherever you like them. Okay, you just sit comfortably and we're going to sit for about 20 minutes, okay? We're going to put our hands together. We're going to give a little half bow. You can rub your hands together. You can create a little friction. We're going to take those hands and you can put them on your face. You can put them over your eyes. You can rub them through your hair. You can kind of massage your ears down to the lobes a couple of times. You can tap out your chest and your traps. Massage your belly, a nice little massage. You can go ahead and massage your lower back, extend your legs, and relax your legs if you need. We're going to have a little question and answer. Michelle is new, and I'll tell her what that means. So question and answer is an opportunity for you to ask specific questions. Sometimes it'll take a different form. People might have homework, like right now. Many of us are doing like 100-day meditation challenge. So every day for the first month, people decided how much they can do daily. Like if it's threatening, like, ooh, I don't feel like I have much time, it's uncomfortable, they might have chosen something small, like 5 minutes, 1 minute. Then the next month, you're going to increase it. If you're at 5 minutes, maybe you go to 10. And then the month after that, you might increase it to 15. So what if I told you, Michelle, that we could literally change your life in 1 week? Can happen for any human being. You could in 1 week, if you just put them in a room with the support to make them face themselves, it could take less than a week, right? But what happens is we have busy lives and we prioritize differently. We got things we want to do. Meditation doesn't seem so sexy. We're like, yeah, I get it. I'm a little bit more calm, but I don't know how much time I want to really dive into this. But what if you had to be with yourself? You had just no choice. You were in a room looking at a wall with nothing to do for just 1 week. So how many weeks in a year, right? 52? Let's say you live 100 years, right? So that's 5,200 weeks. Could you devote 1 week to have a life-changing process that would actually give you a clue to what life is really about, who you really are, and at the same time give you a way, like a technique, things that you can do to put into your life to help your life? Would it be something that we would donate and designate our time for? Most of the time, until we have some kind of pressure, some need, something that's really uncomfortable, we don't really knuckle down, right? Is anybody out there like who when you studied for tests back in school, like high school and college, was a cram guy? We just crammed. Who crammed? Okay, Adela crammed. Who studied every day until the test? Anybody did that? Michelle, she's amazing. She's got tremendous follow through. That's great. So we can see if you have good follow through. We'll talk about question and answer after and see if you have questions. But then if this is something you want to continue, you can continue and you can see if you can make the little steps necessary to develop this into kind of like an anchor. Okay. So before we start, a lot of the people on the Zoom right now, they're basically, I have experience with all of them through a plant medicine process. So plant medicine is most of the time, not always, but Amazonian, Central American, these kinds of indigenous plant medicines that can have a psychedelic, psychotropic effect, and that can be used for mental, spiritual, and also physical healing. So I just went and investigated a retreat center in Costa Rica. I just got back last night, very late, actually, around midnight. Look at that. Israel turned her camera on. All right, I can see her face. She's always got her camera on. That's great. So, hey, so I just investigated this plant medicine retreat in Costa Rica, and they're running retreats now. They have runoff from Solterra. Solterra is a big retreat center. They are well known. And they're kind of full. But anyway, he's developing the property. It's beautiful. And he's very serious. He's a man with a lot of money and a lot of drive and a lot of staff and know-how. So he's developing this beautiful retreat center, and he wants to add things in, like a longevity center where we do things like what I do, like functional medicine, Chinese medicine, and other kinds of things. So I'm not going to talk a lot about it, but he is interested in adding more components. And in the future, if any of you wanted to talk about that, go down, check it out or something like that, you're welcome to ask me, because I'm going to be down there for the month of June and July. working down there, and I'm still having my practice. It's open, everything's the same. I'm just going to be seeing patients through Zoom or through the phone. So like our relationship and how we do things doesn't really change. I can talk to you, I can prescribe, nothing differs. It is nice to have face to face, but especially in our digital age, we don't need a face to face. We can still have good contact and get what we need done, right? So that process will be developing. It's kind of exciting. So I think of it exciting in this way. So when you guys are out there looking for plant medicine, you're probably looking for more like mental, emotional, spiritual healing. Some of you might have physical needs, but most of the time people are thinking more trauma, things like that. When I first started working with you, you started here because you had a physical reason, right? You had physical issues going on and you wanted help with those, okay? So I think we all agree that the body and the mind, they influence each other, right? So when you look at the mind, the placebo effect, have you guys ever heard the word the placebo effect? When you say placebo, it makes it sound bad, doesn't it? Like it's not quite real, like we minimize that word placebo. You know, the influence of the placebo effect is almost 30%. 30%. So 30% improvement that is mind driven, that has been studied over multiple double-blind studies. 30% is tremendous, right? That's very significant. So what if, for example, any particular disease, people are motivated by pain, they're motivated by things like that. What if you could work with your mind and get a 30% increase just by working with your mind? It's tremendous, right? It's nothing to minimize. It's just showing the relationship between the mind and the body. So if you had a process where you could have it merge, someone could analyze you, give you the option for a bodily process, also give you the option for a mental, spiritual process, and also give you the option for habit formation and life creation and coaching process. That seems very full and thorough, right? That's always what I've been trying to work towards and think about is how can we have us as human beings reach more of our potential? How can we do it? Because most of what happens is we get kind of like a compartmentalized fabric, kind of split apart process. What that means is I have patients, you see them, they come in all day, and what happens is I'll tell them things like, hey, why don't you go down the street, go do yoga at this place? I would have to say not even 10% will go, and I could walk there in less than 5 minutes. Nobody goes. They're like, oh, I know, I need to do some yoga, and then they just don't bother, right? It has to be convenient enough, or the patient has to suffer enough for them to do an uncomfortable thing. But if you went someplace and it makes sense to people, mind makes sense, it's important, body makes sense, it's important. Oh, there's a process, I can do this, I need to work on my food, that makes sense, okay? I need to do something with my mind, it's all scattered, it's all over the place, that makes sense. I need a way to be able to work on my body, oh, my hormones are off, that makes sense. I need a way to be able to work with my habits and things like that in life because I don't want it to just go back to how it was. That all kind of makes sense, okay? Oh, Chris and Sue are there, great. So if you had some place that could outline that for you, it would be a thorough healing experience. And that's what I'm hopefully moving towards because I think it's useful for everybody, right? So if any of you are interested in the future, you just let me know and I'll give you some details and I'll be down there for a couple of months over the summer. So we're going to do question and answer. Question and answer is where we start with the live audience and then we start with the Zoom. So if you have a question, you can just ask a question. If you don't have a question or anything you particularly want to say, you just bow out. You don't have to talk. You're not required. Okay. So Michelle or Brian, I'll start with you. I'll just give you the opportunity because you're new. Michelle, do you have a question or a thought or something that came up that you'd like to mention?
Well, is there any, everyone's different, but, like for people, you said I could use a chair, I don't have to sit on the floor, I could stand even?
Can?
Yeah, it doesn't require, okay. Yeah. That's good.
So let me address that first. So that's a posture question. Is it better to stand? Is it better to sit? Oftentimes people start with sitting because it's actually the most stable and it's the easiest to do for a longer period of time. So we think it's easier to stand. Try standing for an hour. It's hard. It's harder than sitting for an hour. Try it. I've done it. Okay. And try standing all day. It's very hard, by the way. The body it's very uncomfortable on the body. Try lying down and not falling asleep and meditating for 1 hour. It's very hard. So people think lying down is the easiest. You see a lot of these talks, like if you see there's a teacher and it's kind of at a yoga studio, people will kind of do their practice for 10 minutes and then everybody lays down and listens to the teacher. They don't even sit up straight. That's often what you see. And by the way, in Korea or in Asia, that would never happen. You would never lay down while the teacher is talking. It's just one, it's a sign of disrespect, but two, it's also a sign of a lack of minimal discipline. It is physically uncomfortable to sit for long periods of time. It is. But when you do it, what happens is it becomes much easier. It actually becomes the easiest way to be. And when you do a yoga class, at the end of the yoga class, they always have Shavasana, right? Corpse pose, where you can just lie there. They save that pose for last for a reason. It's the hardest pose. To have awareness, to be able to sit there with awareness and alertness while you're laying down takes the whole 50 minutes before you get to that last 5 minutes of Shavasana. It takes the whole 50 minutes to calm you down to be able to handle it. And there's always someone in every yoga class that falls asleep and snores. Always. There's always some light snoring going on, right? So they're not being alert, they're not being present, they're basically taking a nap. So Shavasana and laying practice, that can definitely be done. It's just a very advanced practice, honestly, it really is. So I was talking to Amir last week, and we were talking about meditation. I gave this metaphor, a man once asked the Buddha, how do you meditate? And the Buddha's like, well, what do you do? It's like, I play the lute. It's like a guitar. It's like, all right. So tell me, if the lute the strings are too loose, can you play the guitar? He's like, no, you can't, right? It won't make a sound. It's like, if the strings are too tight, what happens? He's like, well, you're going to break your strings. It's like, what do you need to be able to play the lute? He's like, you need it finely tuned, just right, medium, so you can actually play. Well, meditation is the same. Too loose, right? What happens is we just fall asleep, we don't pay attention, it becomes something that we're not engaged in. Too tight or too rigid, then eventually something will cave. We won't be able to manage. So how can we have the body upright in a relaxed fashion? They say, imagine as if a string were on the top of your head, just a little string, and it was just lightly pulling you up. So where your spine just lightly got pulled up, not where you're ramrod straight, lightly pulled up, legs relaxed. That's the physical posture. And then the mind, is it going to be too loose? Are you going to have your eyes closed, head looking up, fantasizing? Are you going to be like this, flexing, really trying to have a breakthrough? Are you going to be nice and relaxed, shoulders relaxed, chest open, and let your mind just kind of do your practice? Medium strength, like the lute, okay? And we keep returning to it over and over, right? We have awareness, we let go, we return. Awareness, we let go, we return. May I just say a few things about you? So I noticed that you're you're here for the first time. I don't want to call you out. You're like, hey, I just came in. What are you doing? But you come in and people are generally nervous. It's hard to sit still. We have anxiousness, right? And it makes us jittery. And this jitteriness has to go somewhere. So we tap our toes, we move our legs, we do fidget, we do these things. Even if we were to sit there and just not move, all of this energy will drive people a little bit nutty. So it's just a very simple clue or a sign that we're uncomfortable in our skin. Even when you're around somebody you love and completely comfortable with, like your husband, you might feel great at certain times and be completely open and okay to be just there. But then if you have a conversation about something that you don't enjoy, he needs to talk to you about something, you don't like it, you get antsy. That's what all human beings do, right? We cannot feel comfortable in our own skin, right? So what that is that's a discharge. It's a sign of resistance to what is going on. Something is happening. It's not good or bad, but we have resistance and our body has anxiousness because of it. And we need to discharge. We need to get rid of it. So part of the process of meditation is, wow, I'm recognizing it. Look how antsy I am. I didn't realize that before. Now I'm practicing letting it go. It's not so easy. I didn't realize that letting go of this anxiousness is that hard. And then I'm returning. What am I returning to? I'm just returning to the moment. And every time you return to the moment becomes a little bit bigger. You take in more, right? You ever driven and then before you notice, you're like past your stop? Like, what the hell? I didn't even see what was going on. So caught up in your head, you just passed where you're supposed to go, right? And you didn't even wreck or hurt anybody. You missed your stop. You didn't kill anybody. And you're in your head thinking about something else all at the same time. That's how diverted our attention is. It's a little bit on driving, it's a little bit on thinking, but it's not on looking around. Okay? So when you're present, you can see more clearly. So let's take a second and let's do a simple exercise, okay? So I want everybody to take a second to just look at your hand. Just look at it. Just take a second and put just your awareness in your visual field. Just look at it, okay? See the lines of it. See the color of your hand. All right? Now, I'm going to have you actually smell it. Bring it close to your hand. Just smell your hand. Only let yourself be aware of the smell. Okay? Now, take your other hand and just touch your hand. Only be aware of the sensation of what you're experiencing, the skin, the wrinkles of your hand, the fleshy part around the thumb, the thin part in the center, the knuckles. Just touch it. Now let's clap our hands. Now let's just hear the sound as it claps. Okay. So all of this is accessible simultaneously. You can see clearly. When you just looked, because we just did it for a short amount of time, I told you to do it, so you're just looking at your hand. You probably weren't thinking about yesterday. You're just looking at it. You saw your hand. When you smelled it, you're like, that's weird. Smelling my hand doesn't smell like anything. I smell great. You smell it, like, okay, it smells like whatever your hand smells like. Okay? And then you touched it. You notice what it feels like to have the ridges and the wrinkles and the texture, the dryness, the moisture, all of that. All of that is happening simultaneously, plus the sense of sound, plus the sense of taste. I didn't ask you to taste your hand, plus the thinking mind, which is always thinking. All of these things are happening simultaneously. All of this information is coming into us, and we're not appreciating it, right? So, you ever eaten a meal after you hadn't eaten for a long time and you're really hungry? And you eat it and you, oh, this is so good, right? Because you really notice it. One, you have a lot of desire, but two, you really notice it, as opposed to when you're eating and it's no big deal. We eat all the time, we're overly full and we're eating. All we have there is desire. We don't actually have the sense of what it really tastes like. One of the things for Americans, honestly, when it comes to food and diet, is that Americans are very used to very strongly favored foods. It's rich, a lot of real sweetness and richness to American food. So I was looking at, like, I ordered an acai bowl for my daughter for the first time. I never actually had an acai bowl myself at the hotel. And it's like eating ice cream, and it's packaged as a health food. Yes, acai is good for you, but you got it with all this sugar and all this granola and everything else. If you ate acai 3 times a day, you'd be a diabetic probably within a couple of months. It's true. And we think that this is the optimum of health. I'm getting an acai bowl. It's not that it's bad. It just has a lot of sugar to it, and we're used to it, and that's what we want. So when you start to detox, you've done a detox with me, and you start to have lighter flavored foods and things like that, you crave the things you're used to. And then when you kind of calm down, everything calms down and you do reintroduction, you put foods back into your life that you hadn't been eating as much, you just notice it. You're like, ooh, right? First time my wife ever did a detox, she did a detox with me, and she has a lot of food desire. And afterwards, she didn't do reintroduction right. She didn't take her time. She's like, it's over at 12 o'clock. I'm gonna have a brownie at 12:01. So she eats a brownie. She only gets halfway through and she literally vomited. She puked. The brownie, when you have very strong flavored, very sweet foods, you don't even notice how sweet they are. They actually burn a little bit. There's so much sugar and sweetness to it. When you eat it, when you're very, very clean, they actually have a little burn to them. And it's very hard on the system, and she vomited. It's like if any of you out there, you do like a dieta or something and you go have a ceremony, you don't just immediately have a steak right after, except for Gilbert. You don't have a steak right after because you'll probably vomit too. Your body's not prepared for such heaviness, right? So any posture is basically okay. This is a nice stable posture for us to start. Okay. Any other particular questions or something else that came up right away? Okay, good. Anything from you, Brian? Okay. So is everybody still doing their little challenge? You're doing their every day? Are we good with that? All right, good. Just a little accountability check-in. Anyone out there have a question or a homework or something they would like to bring up? If you do, please just kind of raise your hand. Anyone out in Zoom land? Okay, Gilbert's making a move. Let's hear you, Gilbert. What's going on, my friend?
Yeah, just I'm starting to increase my time, and I'm sensing once I get like to that 50-minute mark, I mean, I'm unaware of it because I have the app. I'm feeling a lot of resistance, like a lot of resistance. I mean, it's almost like it's really strong in my mind. And I did multiple sessions in the morning, and I got up like at 3:30 and I couldn't go to sleep. So I said, well, I'm going to meditate. I meditated, then I did a session. I got up, I sat down again. And about after 50 minutes, 52 minutes, it hit me like a ton of bricks. And it's kind of thrown me for a loop, in my head. I know there's a lot of ups and downs in this game. So, what's the best way to increase your time? Or what is your suggestion on, how to approach the increase in time? Because going from like 10 minutes to 15 to 20, it was like my body was asking me, my mind was asking me a little more, a little more. And now that I reached this plateau, kind of, I'm like, I don't know. So that's my question, Doc.
That's a great question, and it's a common thing when you hit around 50 minutes, honestly. It's between 40 to 50 minutes. What will happen is you'll start to notice that we're all human beings with a body. So some people's bodies are more flexible and limber, other people's bodies are tighter, so they have physical pain. But the mind, we're all sharing a mind. What that means is, I'm just saying that we all have a human brain. So I've noticed some patterns with people, not everybody, but for many people. So you get to meditate, whatever number of minutes is not so hard in the beginning, a couple of minutes. It can be uncomfortable for some people, but you can normally settle in. And then there's like a time once you practice for a little bit and you get to hit 20 minutes. For a lot of people, 20 minutes is difficult. That's kind of like a real antsy time. You might have felt it in the beginning, around 15, 20 minutes. And then you kind of do a breakthrough where 15, 20 minutes isn't so bad. So when I have beginning people, that's why I only do 20 minutes. It's because it's a very antsy time for people. But then if we don't have new people, we're always doing over 20 minutes because that's normally we've gone through that plateau. So then that next plateau, some people get 30, 40, and it's very common around 50 minutes, an hour. It's true. It's a very antsy time. So there's a couple different ways to increase the time. One, you just add in a portion, like a walking portion or a Qigong portion. Walking is very, very useful because you've been sitting so long. It's good to kind of break that posture and to move. So what I would tell you to do, remember that when you do walking or Qigong or chanting, none of these are an end of practice. They're a continuation of practice in a different form. So you're just doing moving meditation. As you're walking, you're just doing the same technique. You're just physically moving. You're discharging that physical discomfort and letting the aches and the creaks and everything go out. So add in a walking. If you can't walk because you got a small office or something like that, you can stand and do the Qigong or something like that. And then you can get back into it, okay? So the main thing that it takes is just the persistence. So doing something that breaks it up. Another thing is to do it for a purpose. This is really an interesting way to experience it. What that means is right now we're meditating for ourselves, right? We are told it's good for us. We experience some physical benefit of it. So it's harder for people to do things for themselves because we honestly don't love ourselves enough, right? We just don't. If we did, I'm going to call you out just a little bit, Gilbert, but we know you smoke, okay? And I'm not saying that that's good or bad. It just has an effect, and I'm not criticizing you for it. I got a lot of bad habits. You see me in my underwear in Peru. We're friends, okay? So smoking is, we know intellectually that it's not good for us, but desire is strong and it's a habit, and the momentum of it carries it forward. But I've talked about this before. If you were a pregnant woman, you would give it up. I know you well enough to say that, Gilbert, you're a loving man. If you had a child in your belly, you wouldn't smoke. It would mean something to you. And I know that to be true, right? So we have a self-love issue, most people. So doing something for someone else, one of the things they do in a lot of tradition is they make vows. Every time they meditate, they, in traditional Buddhist circumstances, like when you go to temple and stuff, they do the 4 vows. There are the 4 vows in the Quantum school. It's something, I don't even have them memorized, honestly. It's something like sentient beings are numberless. We vow to save them all. Delusions are endless. We vow to cut them all off, you know. The teachings are infinite. We vow to learn them all, right? It becomes a huge thing that nobody thinks is possible. But it's like having a target. So if you had a target, right? Have you ever noticed this, that like if you set up a goal for yourself, and this is what I've noticed in life. If you set up a goal, you probably only get 80% of the way there. Most people do. So if your goal is to meditate 10 minutes a day, you might make that. That's not too huge. But let's say it was an hour a day for a month, you might get that hour a day for, I don't know, 20 days, and then you kind of petered. It's a common thing. So one way to make a goal is to make it bigger, bigger than what you feel is even attainable. 20% more than you think you can handle, because you're probably going to get 20% less. So that's a goal strategy, but it's part of this process of connecting to something larger. So right now, what I would do for you, Gilbert, is yes, you can break it up with walking and time, but let's think of something that's important to you, something that you want to dedicate your practice to. So the first time, like I sat a longer period of time, one of the first times was, I remember my brother was like suicidal, and it was disturbing. I wasn't here, I was in a foreign country. So it really freaked me out. I didn't have anything I could do. I couldn't call him. He didn't have a phone. I couldn't do anything. I was stuck. So it's like, man, I can't do anything. I'm not just going to go and get drunk. That's not going to help him. I'm just going to sit here and I learned how to meditate. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to bow. And I could do more. I could do 1,000 bows. I could meditate for a few hours, because in my heart, I was like, I can't do anything for him right now. All I can do is dedicate the merit, that all of the good that comes from this practice, I want to send his way, right? So you can do it for something. So if you're trying to increase your time, like think of something that means something to you, that's important to you. Gilbert, do you feel comfortable unmuting yourself and saying one thing out loud that's important to you? First thing that comes to your mind. Could be a person.
My son.
Your son. Okay. You love your son. You talked a lot about him in Peru. I remember. You called him like every day, and I heard you talking. So then you could do something as simple as that. You could just say it in your mind, you know, I'm dedicating this practice to you. If you need like a reminder, like some people put like a picture or something, if they have an altar or a sacred place, someplace they go, you put a picture. And then make it a bite-sized amount. What that means is if you see a picture of your son there every day, it's nice, but it probably won't motivate you after a month. After a while, it's going to be commonplace, because you're trying to increase your time. You're getting past a resistance point. So let's choose an amount of time. Let's do 30 days. Since you're already doing 100 days, you're already like 3 weeks in. So 30 days, it's not even halfway, okay? So 30 days, what I want you to do is dedicate your practice to your son. And you choose the amount of time, the target you're trying to hit, right? And all of the merit, all of the good from that is going to him. Is going to him. And I'll give you an extra piece of homework. You know how like Don Jose and all these plant medicine people, when they're blowing it out, like, shoo,
Right.
you've seen him do it. You've done it. You've heard me do it, right? The breath is magical. The breath is life. So when you dedicate it to you, when you dedicate it to him, you know, do it before and after you sit. You know, I'm gonna dedicate all this practice to you. And then go ahead and practice. And then afterwards, you dedicate it, shoot it to him, shoot him some love, just send it to him. Okay? And watch what happens. You'll make it. 30 days, you'll make it, and it won't even be as hard as you think. Yeah, so this idea of like this vow, the vows, I've always been intimidated about them. When I was a little boy, I remember watching Nostradamus with Orson Welles. Anybody see that when you were little? Nostradamus going over by Orson Welles. You've seen it. Orson Welles is some Citizen Kane. He's this big burly man with the voice, and he's got his beard, and he was overweight. And he was talking about the Nostradamus prophecies, and they had all these pictures of doom and gloom and apocalyptic stuff. He scared the shit out of me. I was like 6, 7, and I was a little Christian boy in like the Bible Belt of Arkansas, and I was trying to be a good little kid, trying to fit in. I'm an Asian kid. Everybody's white. They're all making fun of me, and I'm trying to go to church. And then I watched Orson Welles talking about how I'm going to burn in a pot of oil. I was like, this is terrible. And all of these things that good Christians did was they would march into their death of martyrdom with joy in their heart. They'd be singing. I would read these texts where like people would be boiled and burned alive and they're singing hymnals. And I was like, oh my God, I am not strong enough to do this. I am not a strong enough person to be a good Christian, was my thought. It really was. And it hurt my feelings. I was like, yeah, I'm not good enough. I'm not getting to heaven. So that experience kind of grew with me throughout life. And then I hear these, like even in Buddhist accounts, you know, they have these bodhisattvas that make these vows. And the one that scares me the most is Jijang Bosal, or Jizo in Japanese. It's basically the bodhisattva who helps you when you die. So when you die, right? Normally when we die, you guys all heard the stories of like someone comes, like your family members or something, and then you get a life review, and then you go to the white light. We kind of heard these stories. I don't know if it's true. I haven't died recently that I remember. But what happens is this particular bodhisattva comes and helps your consciousness go to a next life. That's what it does. And his vow is, he said he will not attain full enlightenment until every being in hell attains enlightenment first. And I was always like, oh my God, you got to go to hell. It's hot there. I don't want to go. That was my first resistance. And 2, there's a lot of people in hell. It's like I got to wait for all these lazy people in hell who don't even want to go to heaven. And I got to get them there before I can go. And that is a big task. It's uncomfortable. And it scared me. But you know what's funny? Is as soon as you make the vow and you relax the fear around it, you just say it and say, all right, so be it, whatever may come of it, I vow. And then things just immediately relax to some degree. They immediately open to some degree. The resistance was just the fear. It's just the fear. So like in Zen, they would say, as soon as you make that vow, I vow, Zen master would be like, oh, all beings already all saved, right? The only thing is you don't experience it that way because of the resistance and the fear. Samsara is equal to nirvana. Nirvana is equal to samsara. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. These are terms you might not understand. This waking everyday consciousness with all of our delusion and suffering, it is also an enlightened state where everybody's awake, living the life that they need to. It's basically heaven is hell and hell is heaven. It's a matter of how you perceive it, right? You heard this famous story, like a man goes up to I don't know what happened, the prelude, but some man goes up to heaven and somebody's showing him around and he opens a door and he's like, hey, I'm going to show you hell. He's like, okay, let's see it. So he opens the door and inside there's this big long table, and in the table there's every manner of all the delicious foods you could ever want in life. And people are sat on other sides of the table, but they have these very, very long boards attached to their arms. So they can't bend. So they can't actually eat. They would scoop it up and they're so hungry. They've been hungry for so long. They've been craving. They'd scoop up the food and they'd throw it into their mouths and they couldn't eat. And the guy looks in, he's like, oh, that looks terrible. They're so hungry. Their bellies are all protruding. So much temptation, beautiful food everywhere, but they can't eat. He's like, yeah, that sucks. Let's take you to heaven now. So then he goes to heaven and he opens the door and he shows them it's the exact same thing. Except for the people, what they do is they scoop the food and they feed the neighbor across from them. And the neighbor feeds them. It's the exact same scene. Nirvana is samsara. This life that we're living now is already complete. It's already whole. There's no separation from the source, if you want to say. You can't separate from the source. How? Where are you going to go to hide from God or the Buddha or the source? Where's the rock that you can actually put yourself under where you cannot be found? It doesn't exist, right? We just feel separate. We're in our heads. We're attached to our thinking. We're attached to our emotions. We're attached to our likes and dislikes. And we're constantly trying to feed ourselves, trying to throw this food up. Every once in a while you get a grape and you're like, ooh, I got something today, yay, right? That's like when you go and, I don't know, you go and you meet a new person and you have like a casual hookup. You like threw a grape in your mouth. Oh, hey, I felt good for like a second. And then that passed. Now you're like, oh, now I need more grapes. I got to go find more grapes, right? And that's why oftentimes like service, this idea of love and service really is the magic ingredient. When you live in this sense of service, you receive back. It's actually exponential, which means the amount that you give is not the amount that you get back. And it's the same with meditation. If you do 10 minutes a day, you don't get 10 minutes of benefit. It's an exponential return. You will have a certain amount of time after meditation where you're a little bit calmer, a little bit more able to handle things. But then it stacks. And then eventually somebody gets mad at you, and you notice that you didn't get mad right away. You're like, oh, okay, I saw it. Before I never saw it. And then I learned to let it go. And then all of a sudden with time is your relationships start to clean up. People are nicer to you. You're nicer to other people. Your job performance changes. Your desire to be better for your body, to take more love and care of yourself grows. And that's all because you took the time to just be aware, let go, and return to the present. Right? And then you really start to get into service and you say, oh my God, look at how many suffering people in the world, so many suffering people. And every time you feed them, if you're feeding them with, well, I'm going to give him, he better give me, and you give him and he doesn't give you, you get mad. You're like, I just gave you and you didn't give me anything, you get mad. But if you just give it to him, and then it's not going to come from the hand that you're expecting, by the way. You think it's going to go in with this hand and his hand is coming right in. That's what we think, right? I do good now. I want my good back now. But you do your thing. And then all of a sudden someone taps you on the shoulder and you turn around and there's a hand of food. And in the hand is like bigger, better food. You just wanted some grapes. And now you get like a whole chicken. You're like, oh, I got chicken. And then you get that. So this is what I've noticed in life. I don't know if it's a universal rule. This is just what I've noticed. Okay. So vows, this dedication to other people. First time I started to dedicate my practice, I got scared because I was like, if I give the merit of my practice to someone else, I thought it was like a battery. I'm filling up my battery. And then if I give him all the juice I just filled up, that means I got no juice again. I got to start over. I was like, when am I ever going to get any charge in my battery? I was a little nervous. But then I realized that if for example, like Qigong, if I had Brian over here, Qigong is like an energy circulation process. And let's say Brian were here, this is the thing you can do. you can literally breathe in and breathe out and channel down your arm, and you can put energy into a body. It's actually easy to experience it. I could have any of you experience it within 5 minutes. You can experience something coming into you. Be like, oh, okay, I get what you're saying, right? But if I push from my belly, if I'm just giving you my chi, then I will get tired. It will drain battery. But here's another very simple way to do the exact same thing. You just open up and realize that it's everywhere. It's omnipresent. This energy is everywhere. And you can do a visualization, like you can literally take it from outside into your head and down into your arm, and you can channel it into another person, and you don't get tired. It's amazing. It's amazing. When I was in Costa Rica the first time and I was working with this guy who was having a really hard time, we were both under the medicine, and the medicine team called me to work on him. And they saw me, I was physically rubbing him down. And also he had a lot of discharge, so I was clearing him out, helping anyway with the best I could. And I never like took from him because he's, full of bad mojo. You guys know what that means. You've been next to people when they're pouring off bad energy, right? When they're clearing, you've experienced it. It's uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable because you can get sick. You're around somebody else who's that energetically sick and they're pouring it off into you. Unless you know what to do, you can get sick, make you nauseous, give you a headache, etc. So he's pouring out and I'm kind of clearing it out, but I'm not just like doing this and taking it. I don't want it. I don't want it at all. So I have like a right left. You learn these things. So I take it with my left hand and I put it right out to my right hand. And I actually took his puke bucket. He had his puke bucket, right? Because you're all on ayahuasca, so you're carrying around your puke bucket. I just put it next to me, and he's lit there flailing around, having a hard time. I'm rubbing him down, taking it from his left hand and putting it in the puke bucket with the right hand. Just clearing, getting rid of it. Some of these things you don't understand what it means. So there are ways to kind of move things through you so you don't have to be like a conduit. Or not a conduit. Conduit's okay, but you don't have to be like a bowl that gathers. You can be more like a sieve, a colander that things move through. Things move through. And the more you're open to things, the more you understand that it is kind of an inexhaustible process. It really is inexhaustible, right? Anybody else have a question or a comment or something out there in Zoom land that please, Amir.
Hi, Dr. Gene.
Hey, Amir.
So I was in Orlando this weekend. We went with the 3 kids, and one of the kids was misbehaving pretty badly throughout the whole trip, and he just kept getting on my nerves. And kind of like what you were talking with energy, how you could move it. I got extremely angry, and I was noticing my mind just like rerunning certain scenarios or coming up with scenarios that didn't even happen, and I'm getting upset, getting more angry, getting more frustrated. And I'm seeing that I'm doing this for myself, but I couldn't stop it.
Yeah.
So I just wanted you to comment on that.
So once the train has left the station, it's out. It's going to go a certain distance depending upon how much gas is in the tank. So we talk about this curve. If you notice something happening, arising early, you can sometimes let it go early. But if it's to a certain degree advanced, it's gonna go, right? It depends upon how strong your practice is. If your practice is very strong, sometimes you can let go of things even when they're very advanced. But everybody has different buttons that get pushed, right? I have a child and I got my buttons pushed in Costa Rica this last week because I'm with my child 24/7 in a hotel room and you got to entertain them. And of course, I want to be all Zen Gene, but Zen Gene gets his ass kicked just like anybody else, right? It was tough, just like you, Amir. So the first process is to notice and to do your best to let it go. But when we can't, sometimes this is a point of wisdom. When you realize that you're stuck, that the momentum of it is too much, the frustration, the anger, all of that is too much, then you can surrender. This surrendering, knowing that it will pass. Say, okay, I'm going to be super angry. Hopefully I just don't beat anybody or get in trouble or put my foot in my mouth too much to where it's unrecoverable. But that train has left the station. I'm going to surrender to the fact that I cannot control it, but I know that it's going to pass. Okay, it's going to pass because it always does. Everything passes. This is the process of learning over and over that everything rises and everything falls. Everything rises and everything falls. If you truly digested this one point, then you would have experienced true emptiness. Emptiness doesn't mean that nothing's going on. It means everything goes up and down. It just arises and falls, arises and falls. And the instantaneous nature of it, to wake up to the truth of it, because the waking up to the truth of it can be in an instant. It's just an arising. The anger doesn't mean you're a bad person or he's a bad kid. It just means you're angry at the circumstances. That's all it means, right? So I told you the story. In Korea, the most famous monk in Korea is probably named Won-hyo. He's on this trip to China, long, arduous trip. He's with his buddy, and they were going, and it's raining cats and dogs, and it was super dark, and it's dangerous, and they went inside this cave. They're so thirsty. They've been traveling all day. They didn't have any water. I couldn't see anything. So he's just fumbling around in the dark amongst this dark, clammy cave, and he feels something, and it's full of water. So he's so thirsty, he just drinks it. And at the time, it was the most delicious water he'd ever had in his life because he's so thirsty and he was so tired. He just slept on some rocks. And then the next day he wakes up and he sees that what he drank from was actually a human skull. And inside it was putrefied water full of worms and everything else. And he had this immediate, very deep realization. Last night, it was the most delicious thing he'd ever drank in his life. And now he sees it in the cold light of day that it's gross. And he realized that it's all based on his mental perception. And when he realized that, because we can understand that, but that's not the same as realization. When he realized that, he had a huge awakening. Boom. And he stood up and he's like, I don't need to go to China. I don't need to find a master. I found my master, right? Brian, who's your master? Only that?
Don't know.
Okay. I thought you were going to say show enough. If you haven't seen Barry Gordy's The Last Dragon, it's hilarious. And that line is classic, show enough. But he realized, just like Barry Gordy's The Last Dragon, if nobody's ever seen it, it's a pretty standard kind of like Kung Fu tale. But he doesn't know who the master is. He's such a good martial artist that he can actually fight really well. And he fights this other guy that's actually better than him. And he gets the glow. His hands turn red. He's such a strong fighter. It's like believing in the Force. And you know, the bad guys of the Force, like the Emperor and Darth Vader, they got red lightsabers, right? And they can shoot red force and they're really strong. Okay. So his hands would glow red. And he was getting beat and he'd never been beat before. And he's like, oh my God, oh my God. And he had this koan. Who's the master? He couldn't solve it. He's showing up as putting his head in a bucket of water. He's basically drowning him and making fun of him, yelling at him, kiss my Converse. And then as he's in the water, he keeps having these visions of his teachers saying, when you find who the master is, you're going to get the glow. And you'll be a badass. So he's in there, and then he realizes, he's like, oh, I'm the master. Because his whole movie, he's looking for the master. He's going to this place, that place, finding who's the master, who's the master, who's the master. Just like Kung Fu Panda, he opens a scroll and he says, there is no secret sauce. There's no special place to go. There's no special teacher or teachings. If you can put it all down, if you can look inward, if you can truly experience yourself, then you know who the master is. And he comes up and his body's all glowing yellow, right? So that's chi. When your chi is unlocked, it means you're no longer stuck. Like you got neck and shoulder tensions, how you carry yourself, right? We got mental tension, we got bad food, we got stomach tension. When all of that relaxes and all of this energy that's stuck goes into your body, you just feel the flow, the natural flow. You feel it and you can use it and you can feel other people's flow. It's not mystical. It's just what's happening all around us. It's natural. He comes up, he feels it, and then he's like, I'm the master. And he's all full body glowing. He kicks Shonuff's ass, right? Because he's only got the hands. That's the glow of ego, right? The ego has a lot of power, but it doesn't have full power. So, yeah, you got stuck. That's kind of where your karma, it's kind of like where your karma hits the road. So people say, I don't understand karma. Well, that's karma. What you saw was you got angry because the circumstances were past your capability to handle and relax into. That's where your karma was very visible. Yes, Amir.
You know, with kids, it's a little complicated because I feel that it's my duty to, obviously not to get angry, but to show him that he can't act in a certain way. So you can't just walk away. So, and I feel infuriated from inside, but at the same time, I know it's important I'm a role model for him and I need to teach him these things. So it's a little complex.
I agree. You have a duty and a responsibility to help educate and to bring up your children. For sure you do. I do too, right? We all do. If we have enough mental space, then maybe we can act a little wisely. But when we're too angry, we don't have much mental space to see clearly. You're too engaged in your anger to really probably act wisely, right? So could you back up a little bit and then act is one question? Or could you act in a way that is to a modicum useful? So think of this, Amir. Think of the word useful. Is your action and your instruction being useful? Or is it just making you feel better about what you feel like you should do?
Well, usually I approach him with compassion and love and try to talk to him and sit down. But all the time that just kind of goes over his head. And we could sit down, talk for an hour,
Sure.
and 5 minutes later, he's doing the same shit that he was doing before. So I always start out with compassion, and it just seems like it never works.
Well, maybe compassion is not the act. What your idea of compassion is softness, right? Showing love and appreciation is softness. Sometimes people need hardness, and hardness is compassion. You've heard stories that I've told you about going to the Zen master and he beats you. And the other Zen master tells him that was grandmotherly kindness. Being hit was actually a kindness, right? Sometimes I'm not telling you to hit your child. That's not what I'm saying. I'm using historical story. So this idea of how can you be firm? One time, Sun San Sunim was sitting here and a kid ran at him, screaming, you know, like kids do, "Ah!" Like 7, 8-year-old kids running at him and screaming. So Sun San Sunim immediately runs at him screaming, "Ah!" Kid freaks out, runs away. And then the onlooker, the students are like, "Oh, what are you doing, Sun San Sunim? You just screamed at this kid." And he's like, "Hey, you know, demons understand what demons understand, right? You give them the medicine that they can understand. He's coming at you with anger, so you show him that, and it wakes him up, and then you instruct later." So one thing about kids really is attention span. They don't have any of it, right? You talk to an hour, ain't none of that getting through. You got like a short window where you can get their attention. It's like, hey, get their attention. They go, what? You're like, don't do that. Okay. And then later you give them a little short explanation about the why. And you know what's interesting is it's much harder on you than them because it requires infinite patience because you're going to have to do that 1,000 times. And they probably still won't get it. You know, I watch my wife and we have a difficult, everybody has different parenting styles, right? You know, like your couples, it's hard to get on the same page. And I see some of the things that my wife does, and it's well, the same with me. There's a lot of things I do is zero use. I'm not helping her out at all. My daughter, that is. And I just noticed because I'm the onlooker, I'm not really angry at the time, so I can just watch. And she's angry. And then the child is doing something and she's trying to instruct, but she's instructing with anger and it's not causing any change. And then it's just repeated behavior. She keeps doing it over and over and over and over. Right? What's the definition of insanity?
Same thing over and over, expecting different results.
Doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. So just because you say, these days my daughter's putting stuff in her mouth all the time, and that's no good. So we must, my wife must tell her, I don't know, good God, 50 times a day, every day, don't put shit in your mouth. And it hasn't changed. It's been a few months. She's heard it 1,000 times. She has not stopped it, right? So at some point we have to think, we can't just not tell her. We have to say something. But how could we be wiser? How can we be more patient? How can we let go of the expectation? What about this, Amir? What about the fact that even kids, we have a duty to them and we love them and we should instruct them. But no matter how good a job we do, if we're perfect parents, doesn't mean that they're going to turn out like we think that they should. Because they got their own karma. And ultimately, everybody's karma is their responsibility. I cannot fix anybody's karma in this room. I can't. There's only you that can do those things. So this idea, this is why we talk about, for example, the 51-yard line that I like to mention a lot. This point of awakening where you hit 51 yards, basically it's 49 to get to the finish line, or it's 51 to get back to 0. So we started down our path. We said, all right, I'm going to be a human being. I'm going to do some kind of spiritual endeavor. Why? Because I don't know, life is sucky and it's hurting me. So I need to do something. But you get to 51% and all of a sudden you're like, oh my goodness, I understand that all of these actions that I've done in my life, I can blame whoever I want. I can blame my parents. I can blame the government. I can blame whomever I want. It doesn't change the fact that the responsibility to change is yours. It is our responsibility. We are not going to get the world to live on our terms. It's an impossibility. There's one thing we can control in this life, only one, and that's our reaction. It's the only thing we can control. Karma, the definition of karma is reaction. It's reaction. Something happens, you react. Get to 51-yard line and all of a sudden you take responsibility. Doesn't mean that the next 49 yards aren't a grind, that it doesn't take 50 downs 1 yard at a time to get there. But you say, all right, I'm going to do it because I know that it's farther to go back. I just cannot close my eyes anymore. You see it, accept the responsibility. So, please.
Amir, I have, there's this poem that I remember every time my children get underneath my skin before I jump out of the window. It's by Khalil Gibran. It's called On Children. And I think of that poem every time I'm having a hard conversation with my children. And it just reminds me that I'm responsible for bringing them to the world or from the world, but they're not, our property overall, right? And then their overall responsibility is to teach me the lessons that I need to know about myself, right? So a lot of the times when we are observing our children as misbehaving, maybe sometimes we're not behaving the way that they want us to. And sometimes if it's not deviant, their misbehavior, sometimes they're just bored out of their minds and they're trying to get someone to understand how to help them out of that boredom. And I have experiences with my nephews, super smart kid, gets in trouble in school all the time. And they ran all these tests on him and he's just bored. He understands the work, just don't want to do it. So they just chalk it up to him having bad, poor behavior. When in actuality, it's the teacher that's not acknowledging the fact that this kid may be bored and giving him something that can actually engage his attention. So that is my tidbit, take it or leave it. Because I know children is hard.
It's a beautiful poem on children, Khalil Gibran. It's a good thing for all of us to kind of reread if we have children. It's a good poem for sure. Having this inspiration and this reminder, like art is a wonderful salve on the human heart, right? So wisdom is repetitious action. So what we can do is we can try to understand how things arise and fall. So one day we'll get wise. And your kids, I think that the lesson of letting go of that's a hard one, you know. It's a tough one. It's not something I've fully digested with children. You know, I love my child so much that even the thought of harm is really hard for me to even entertain. But the letting go of the outcome, because we don't know. They're going to get sick. They're going to make mistakes. They're going to date the wrong boys and girls, right? They're probably going to drink and drive and do all these things that we did when we were young and stupid and got lucky we didn't kill anybody, right? It's a tough one. So you're a good person, Amir. You're working hard on it. Just try to reframe this. Is my action right now, is it useful or not useful? Not good or bad, what should or shouldn't I do? But is it useful or not useful? Okay, what's happening with that? Okay, good. Anybody else have one last quick question or comment? Please, Israel, let's hear from you. No, you take your time. You don't talk much. You take your time.
Hi, Dr. Jean. Hi, everyone.
Hey.
It's not a quick question, so we can table it for next week, but I wanted to get some suggestions for meditating on pain when somebody is ill. My sister hasn't been feeling well for 4 months now. She had a burst appendix and she has been having recurring infections since then.
Okay.
And I'm trying to introduce her to sit with the pain. It almost feels like it's a guest that's like knocking on the door, trying to get attention. But I'm not an expert, or I couldn't find any resource that I can share with her to start just sitting with the pain and feeling the pain while she also goes through treatment.
So I can give you two pieces of information. One, she had a burst appendix, she had a surgery, so she has scar tissue in there along with her inflammation and her infection. So there's other things physically going on. So just taking antibiotics and painkillers aren't going to clean up scar tissue. It's not going to reduce inflammation. So if you want, you can tell her to come, like this same link. I have something called the Root Healing Hour, and she can ask medical questions for the medical side. It's on Tuesday at 9 a.m. No, it's on Tuesday at 9 a.m., 9 to 10. And it's on Thursday from 6 to 7 Eastern Standard Time. So she can come, there's no charge. You just use the same link. And I'm treating patients and I can answer a question. So she can do herbs, which will help her a lot, because what they do is move through the inflammation. And I can give her some medical detail because she's got a lot of scar tissue in there. And she needs to do some things because she's on multiple rounds of antibiotics right now. She needs to do things like probiotics, prebiotics with that to counterbalance while she's doing herbs to move through the inflammation, and that'll help her. So that's a physical side. This is a technique for pain that I like. So when people are not, if they don't have a set and setting, they don't have an environment for meditation and they haven't done it, pain is very hard to work with. It just kicks your ass. So try this. It's a simple labeling process. So when she has pain, which for her is all the time, the first thing you have her do is you just have her be aware of it. Just put her mind there. Okay, so say, hey, sis, I know it hurts. Ask her a couple of questions first. Say, I want you to just point to it. Point exactly to where it hurts. And she's going to point to it. Okay. So now already we have a location. Before, when people say pain, they feel like it's everywhere, but there's a location. Then you ask her the quality of the pain. Is it sharp? Is it stabbing? Is it aching? Is it dull? For her, it's probably dull with sharp and stabbing moments. It's probably what it feels like for her. Constant pain, achy with occasional stabbing is probably what she has. So say, what does it feel like now? Well, right now it's a little bit achy. She's probably, some people when they're in a lot of pain, they're like, I don't know, it just hurts, right? So you give them words, sharp, stabbing, dull, achy. And then all of a sudden they realize that there's a description of it. Okay, now they're getting some precision. It's sharp, occasionally achy, I know where it is. Even that creates a little bit of space because when you have all this pain, you have all this resistance, it makes it huge pain. So they have a little bit of space because now they have a quality, they have a location. Then you give her some homework. All right, I know this sucks, sis. Just try this out. So what you can do is, as you're sitting there, you can just be aware of the pain. You just let your mind experience it. And then when the pain becomes really, really strong, I want you to just label it pain, pain, pain 3 times. Let it go. And then just give her something simple, a breathing practice, right? Like, don't give her too much technique, too much to remember. Maybe just count her breaths. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. She's counting her breaths, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And the pain gets really bad. She says, pain, pain, pain 3 times. Let it go. Come back to 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Keep doing that. And then when it gets really bad again, she does pain, pain, pain. And then you give her the 3rd time. When it's the 3rd time, what you can do is change your position because people are in so much pain, they got to move. They can't just sit there. It hurts so much. So say, sis, just be aware of it. Just kind of lay there, sit there, breathe in and out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Pain, pain, pain 3 times. Go back to breathing. And then on the 3rd time, when it's too much to bear, you just go ahead and move your body or take your pain pill, whatever it is she's doing. And say, sis, let's do it together because she's not going to wanna. She's your sister. She don't want to take instruction from you, right? And then eventually, if she has a little bit of stick-to-itiveness, then she's going to learn that the resistance to pain, when she lowers that, it makes the pain better. It's not going to take the pain away, which is what she wants. Pain is going to be there, but it's going to make the pain better. That's a huge point of learning. So you can practice that and try that and see if it's useful for her. Okay. It's sometimes harder when people are in very, very strong karma. You have to give them some kind of candy, some spiritual candy to get them over it, right? Like my child had to take some Chinese herbs the other day and we didn't have anything sweet to mix with it. So she had to do it straight with water. God bless her. Crying like crazy, and you have to bribe her. I'm like, afterwards, we're going to give you a gummy bear. She could get through it just because she can get the gummy bear, whining and making a big fuss, right? So you kind of bribe them with a little bit. So sis, if you do this, the pain's not going to go away, but what you're going to learn is that your resistance to pain is making the pain worse. So we can make your pain less. Also, Qigong is very good. So the stuff that we do, you can take this hand because it's going to be in the lower right quadrant. It's going to be right here. You can just literally breathe in, breathe out. You can do this over it, and it gives her a point of focus. Okay? You can do that. Why don't you try this? Well, I'm giving you too many techniques. I'm going to give you homework. For her, the technique is try this and pain, pain, pain. That's her technique. That sounds clear? Okay. And if she wants to get some medical information, because herbs will honestly help with the pain. It's not going to fix it all. She's got scar tissue in there, but it's going to help relatively fast. So she'll be like, oh, it feels a little bit better because it's flushing it through. Pain pills don't flush anything. Okay. So that's an option. She can attend the Zoom. The other thing that you can do is, why don't you take one of your hands, your sensitive hand. Which one of your hands is more sensitive than the other, right or left?
Both are
Which hand do you write with?
right.
Okay, so take your right hand, and what I want you to do is just, when she's there, say, hey, sis, can you just lay down? I just want to check you out. You don't have to touch her body. You just kind of comfortably run your hand over the left side of her body. Don't touch her. And then run it over the pain area. It's radiating heat. It is pouring out. It's going to be a big zone of heat, just pouring out due to inflammation. It's going to be like going through this cone of energy. You're going to go woof, woof. You're going to feel it right away. The reason why this is an interesting and useful exercise for you or any of you is that you're attuning your nervous system to what other people's energy feels like. This is so inflamed that it's just pouring out. And it's easy for anybody to feel if they just calm their mind down just for a second and run their hand over it. It's so obvious. So obvious. So when you can attune your nervous system to things, then you can kind of feel what other people are doing. You can also interject. If you have a crying child, Amir, by the way, if you have a crying child and you're really upset, your nervous system is all jangled and your energy's all jangled. Then you just pick them up and you calm down. The first thing you do is calm down your nervous system. And you sit there with a calm nervous system holding them, and you bob them and do all of that stuff. They calm down faster. They pick up on your sense of calm and they calm down faster. So the guy who originated craniosacral therapy, by the way, it started with people just noticed that when he picked up kids, they just stopped crying. Like, you are the child whisperer. You just go to people's houses and he just pick up these kids and they'd stop crying. And he started to reverse engineer it. He's like, what am I doing? And he thought about it. And what he noticed was there's natural rhythms. Everything breathes and there's a fluid metabolism and everything's moving in the body at very subtle levels. So what he did was he stopped being all anxious like this and he let his body go into natural rhythms. And then the child's rhythm would sync with his rhythm. And then they would naturally just breathe and they would get into sync. And craniosacral therapy is a very subtle form of therapy, but you put your hands around the head or around the sacrum, you don't even really move. You just hold it there and you feel people's rhythms. Their mind is doing this, their body is doing all of this stuff. You just feel it and you let yourself calm down. You feel it, you let it be what it's going to be. And then you just help it kind of calm down to a natural rhythm is what you do. It's very subtle, but it's an energetic work that can be for some people very profound. And these are all ways to learn how disjointed we are. Can you have the glow? You can. You go on vacation, you just step into the resort after the flight, everything relaxes, you feel good, you're circulating, you're like, wow. And just 1 second ago, you're all upset. And then you open the door and all of a sudden you see the pool and everything kind of relaxes and you feel good. You temporarily experienced flow, right? So that's always present. And the thing that keeps us from it is all of this tension. Okay. So a good point of homework for you, Amir. First thing you do is this upsetness that you have, that you're experiencing, feel it physically in your nervous system. Like, ooh, I got all this going on in my nervous system. See if you can kind of relax that. And sometimes being angry is not bad. It gets people's attention, gets kids' attention, right? When you're angry, hey, they hear you, right? If you're like, listen, we need to talk about this, they might just ignore you. Sometimes anger is useful. Okay, so was that useful, Israel?
Yes, very much. Thank you. Thank you so much. What are the hours for Tuesdays and Thursdays?
Tuesday is 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And Thursday is 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. It's good to come earlier, not at the very end. If there's nobody really on, I'll turn it off early. Okay. And it's the same link that you used to get here.
Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Yep. So yeah, report back. Tell me what happens, sir. So we're just going to we do a little bit of chanting at the end, and it's weird for new people because they're like, I don't know what you're doing. I feel like I'm in a cult. You're making music, you're chanting. It's just sound meditation. You don't have to do anything. You just hear it. You just hear it. And you just let your mind rest in the sound. You don't have to think about anything. You just hear the sounds kind of cascade over you. We're just going to do about 30 seconds and we're going to close, okay? Gwansim Sai, 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 Gwansim Sai. I like to do a little close. You can follow along on this part. You don't have to say anything, but you can just follow along. Put your hands together. And if you feel comfortable, you can just repeat after me. May all beings heal.
May all beings heal.
May all beings awaken.
May all beings awaken.
May all beings abide in awakening.
May all beings abide in awakening.
You do a shimmy pup. You breathe in, out, in, and out. All right. So thank you, everybody. We'll see you next Wednesday.